Hi, I'm Derrick Jensen. This is Resistance Radio on the Progressive Radio Network. My guest today is Four Arrows, Wahinkpe Topa, whose Anglo name is Donald Trent Jacobs. He's a professor at Fielding Graduate University, an American Indian activist, and author of 20 books and numerous articles and chapters about Indigenous worldview applications to contemporary world issues. So first, thank you for your work as always, and second, thank you for being on my program again.
Well, it's always good to be with you, Derrick, and talk with you.
Thanks. Well, what I'd like to talk about today is a project you're working on that you are attempting to, well, I'll let you say it, but it has to do with a sanctuary for fish. And can you tell people where this is and what it is and why you're doing it?
Well, I'm happy to do that. Been talking about it for about almost a month now. Nonstop, I think. We live in a little fishing village about 3 hours south of Puerto Vallarta in the state of Jalisco on the Mexican coast, the Pacific coast. Like everywhere else in the world, the fisheries are depleting. Every day, the small pangas in our little dirt road village, they go out and come back with smaller and smaller fish, having spent more and more gasoline to go further into the ocean. Many people are not making it. My friend, a Frenchman who's married a local Mexican woman here, has a scuba diving business, and every day he says that they see less fish. So we decided we've got to do something about it. So for about 5 years, I've gone up and down the coast to all the fishing villages, trying to get the fishing cooperativos to be willing to do a no-take zone, which the research says is the state-of-the-art way to restore the ocean. The great model for this is in Cabo Pulmo, which is on the Baja of Mexico, and it happens to be Mexico, which is a big advantage for us because we have our own world model here. But National Geographic recently wrote they believe there's as many fish probably as before humans came. So after about 5 years of failing, because one cooperativo would not trust the other not to sneak into the zone where there's no extraction allowed, and then steal the fish when they get bigger, or the lobster. And we never got anywhere. So I went to interview the people in this little fishing village on the Baja. How did you guys do this? And after interviewing everybody and diving in the waters in which it was just unbelievable to see how much life was teeming, I came back, did a lodge, a purification lodge, and that night someone came to me that said that they had been threatened because they're trying to protect a mangrove swamp in one of the fishing villages about 20 minutes from here called Arroyo Seco. And I guess the swamp, the estuary from the mangrove had been dammed, for land development. And politically, it was a sensitive issue. And he asked if I would come and speak to the cooperativo about the importance of mangroves. Well, while I was there, I just had an intuition that I could maybe sell the idea of a marine preserve area, category 2, which is a no-take zone, to the 35 fishermen I was talking to. And turns out I did. And then because what I had learned in interviewing the people in Cabo Pulmo who had this miracle of success in 7 years that they were able to bring back 400 to 500% of the fish, they said it has to be a grassroots effort, that these things fail around the world when they come from the government or from the rich people that come into the various places in the world to try to force these things. So I brought in 240 members of the community out of the 300 or 400 that are there, as many as we could get, brought in fishermen from Cabo Pulmo, and for 4 hours they had dialogue. At the end of the meeting, our town voted courageously, it's a very poor town, to do this. Immediately, I called Semarnat, which is sort of the Mexican version of the EPA marine portion. And Semarnat said, this is so exciting. We will be the first marine national park on the entire coast here. And they supported us. And so now we're a month into it. And, that's for starters.
So how did they I mean, you raised the question of people being worried about other people cheating or other communities cheating. How did they deal with that in the successful one?
Well, again, we really won't be able to say this is a successful one until when we do the recount in 2 years.
No, the one that's already in place. How did
Oh,
they deal with
right.
that?
Okay, the way that they did it, yeah, that was the big question I asked also, Derek. The way they did it was they got community pride by having lots of education, lots of talking. When people would come into the area to poach, um, little children would go out on their pangas with their father or surfboards or swim even. And they would say, excuse me, but, this is now becoming a national park. We have a no-take zone. We're trying to bring our fish back to the reef to get our reef strong again. And they said that most of the people voluntarily would leave. And those that didn't, once the federal government, Seminole, got involved with it, now it was illegal. So they actually would have to take some boat numbers and report. And once a couple of people started getting arrested and more members of the community started getting pride in it because they started realizing how important it was. Now they have what's called vigilante groups in which everybody in the community has a bracelet that authorizes them to report people who are in the zone. And of course, now it's, a number of years later, their zone was bigger than ours. Theirs was 7 miles by 4 miles. And now only 35% of it is no take. They allow fishing in the others. Ours is only 16 square kilometers. So we're starting out small. But so it's all about community participation, organizing teams of people to watch the coastline. And unlike regular reserves in the world, a no-take zone, when you see a boat in it, they're not supposed to be there. So you don't have to have manpower to go out and see if the size of the fish or the number of fish are the right size. But unfortunately, this is why only 0.8% of all our oceans are protected with these no-take zones. And recent research published in Science magazine after a 4-year study shows that if we don't get up around 15% very soon, by 2048, they report all sustainable seafood fishery industries will be non-existent. So we don't have much time. And so I've been teaching this to everybody, and they're starting to get it. Although this morning we had an old man, we saw him come up on the beach. We don't have signs up yet or anything because we're fundraising for that right now on Kickstarter, believe it or not. But he stole the turtle eggs that were out in front. And instead of getting angry with him, we all went out en masse, and we've solicited him to be in our next video on the Kickstarter to interview him about why he's doing this. And he's speaking to the poverty and how he's always done this. And so we're going to turn him into a spokesman, and then we're going to hire him with the monies that we're getting to actually start protecting the turtles and releasing the baby turtles. So we're doing things like that to develop community pride. But we start the fish count. The University of Guadalajara starts the fish count next week, and then that will be our baseline, and we're going to give it 2 years. And in 2 years, if we have been successful in enforcing it, then we will go public and we will make this an eco-tourist place like Cabo is. They did almost $750,000 just in snorkeling last year. So the fishermen are doing actually better with the ecotourism.
So I live in Crescent City, California, which is on the coast, just a couple, maybe 20 miles south of Oregon, on the coast of California. And there have been big fights here about wanting to put in sanctuaries for fish, and those leading the charge against it have been the commercial fishermen, of course. And so I like what you're saying about the community. I mean, that's so important. And then how did you get past the short-term greed, I saw an article. There's an article in, I believe is it Indian Times? Anyway, there's an article just recently about how secular individualism is killing the planet. and they're talking about this from the dominant culture. How did you? And I keep thinking, sorry to go on so long, but I keep thinking about what you said in your introduction about indigenous worldview applications to contemporary world issues. And
Well, I totally get your question. In our PowerPoint that people can see if they go, all they got to do is Google Kickstarter's Arroyo Seco. And if you look at our videos and our PowerPoint, you'll see one of the PowerPoint presentation slides says that ultimately this isn't about economics. This is about returning to a worldview where you take what you need. And at first, some of my colleagues who are helping, they thought, well, they're only going to be concerned with the economics. How in the future is ecotourism going to help them? How are they going to survive? If we take away a portion of the fish, et cetera. But I just felt that if this isn't a spiritual endeavor, in terms of the significance of others from an indigenous perspective, this isn't going to work. And in fact, what was really, and I don't want this to sound new agey, but when I speak terrible Spanish, and I thought I had this gentleman was going to be my translator when I spoke to the cooperative, but he didn't want to be seen with me because he wanted me to be an outsider coming in to speak about the mangrove. So I spoke in my kindergarten Spanish, but before I did, I said a prayer in Lakota and pointed to the ocean, talking about our brothers and sisters that swim in the ocean. Now, of course, no one could understand the word I was saying, but they did understand. And I felt that I had more nods after that the rest of what I said was just secondary. So I think spirit is really driving this thing and the synchronicities that have been happening. But it's still, we see the short-term greed all the time. The old fellow who stole the eggs, of course, is one example. We also live amongst two of the most wealthy resorts in the world. Correas, where people rent places for $3,000 a night, is about 20 minutes from here. And then Quixmala, a 60,000 acre preserve of the great Jimmy Goldsmith, who was a billionaire in the 70s, right? Also a destination resort. Beautiful, amazing places. But, in trying to bring everyone aboard, there were questions from some of the wealthy fishermen that related to what you just said. Wow, I don't know about if I really want to support this. Is it going to affect my fishing kind of thing, right? And so I'm getting just as much, I don't want to use the word ignorance, let's just say lack of education from the very, very wealthy international people who live here, as I am from the very poor people. I had someone from Santa Barbara last night at one of the film festivals that they're having here over at Correas, who said, well, why don't you want to take fish out of the zone? And then I tried to explain it. And then she says, well, aren't there plenty of fish in the ocean? So when I say that, there's a prediction of a loss of fisheries by 2048 that the science is telling us, most people don't even know that. It's just not getting out there. But what the good news is that every time I sit down with somebody and I start to share exactly the details, that a 7-inch fish that have babies, it gives, say, 150,000 babies. But if it's 10 inches long, it gives 600,000 babies. And if it's full size, maybe, it'll give 2 million, and that these eggs will go way out of the zone. And things like that, Derrick, that you start to explain. And so far, 100% of the people not only have turned around with their sort of dragging their feet on this and not supporting it, and they have actually gone to Kickstarter and pledged their donations, so that we are up now with a month to go, because it's an all or nothing deadline. We're up to $23,000 out of the $27,000 that we're asking for.
And what did you want the money for?
Okay, so we're in the process of creating a nonprofit based on the community association. But here in Mexico, the legalities for that are quite lengthy. And I was anxious to get started because we had Summernauts so supportive, and they wanted to start doing the fish count. And so I want things like, I want signs on the freeway going into the little village saying, welcome to Arroyo Seco, home the first marine national park, and welcome to our living mangrove, which we've just opened up. And so we need buoy markers and anchors that are made out of concrete with chain. We need to dredge the mangrove out more so that the fishermen can actually launch from here. They can't even launch from here now because the mangrove was closed up and the ocean is a surfing ocean, so it's too rough. So we have to spend money for excavation. We have to build a bridge then over the estuary so the little pangas can go under it. The government is paying for the fish count, but there's a whole bunch of costs. We want to start renovating the town in preparation for the ecotourism in 2 years, training people how to do diving expeditions and how to set up restaurants and food places where people can come in anticipation of ecotourism, because people do from around the world. They want to come and see what an ocean looks like before humans came, which is what National Geographic says in their article about Cabo Pulmo. So, we're really trying to get the cost in. I didn't know I'm not a fundraiser. And so my sister told me about some guy that had a beer cooler that he asked $50,000 for on a share fund called Kickstarter, and that he made $14 million in his 60-day period. And I went on and saw that, and sure enough, it was true. And then I looked at the categories on Kickstarter, and it was games, it was journalism, it was film, it was all these things. And then they had one category for food, but there was nothing for environmentalism, ocean restoration. So I went back and looked at the food column, and I thought, well, my golly, if we're going to lose all our seafood by 2048, that's the source of a big, portion of our food. So I went ahead and told them about the Kickstarter, and they do about the Arroyo Seco project. And they, researched it and came back and said, we're going to accept this. And then just yesterday, I think I might have sent this to you, Entrepreneur Magazine, and I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm a, professor, but Entrepreneur Magazine, which is the largest, the Mexico version, which is the largest one and the largest circulating magazine in Mexico, they just did a short little story about it. So we're really crossing our fingers that even though we don't have a business investment, like these other folks on Kickstarter, so far our 49 backers have said, we're doing this for the right reason. And so we're at $23,000, and we've got $4,000 to go to make our all or nothing quota. But now we're starting to get a little ambitious about, trying to not make 13 million, but maybe 50,000, and this will help the people right away. We can start paying them for organizing the enforcement parties overnight. We can buy radios for people to report to the feds, or and just start doing things.
I want to go to I want to go back to what you were saying early on about the concern of people of one community might accept this, another community might not. And it reminds me of an essay that is very famous that I've always disliked, and that's Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons. And right. I'll tell you why I dislike it. That the essay is about how if you have a commons, a common area held by the community, then it won't really work because, say you have a common area where people can run 50 sheep sustainably, and there are 10 families, so each one can run 5 sheep. Well, there's no incentive to not run 11, 12 sheep, so everybody starts cheating, and then the entire common falls apart. But the problem with that, and I'm sure you know this 1,000 times better than I do, the problem with that is it presumes that there is no community. And it presumes that there's no community policing, and it presumes that people would want to rip off their neighbors and rip off the natural world. And I want to say one more thing, and then you take this wherever you want. I keep thinking about what I read in A History of the Shawnee several years ago about how a lot of the nations around Kentucky would not so much live in Kentucky. There were some people living in Kentucky, but not so many, because everybody recognized that the animals need a place to go where they won't be hunted by humans. I mean, every culture has this, places that are off limits, because everybody needs places where Everybody needs sanctuaries. Everybody needs sanctuaries. And I don't understand. Well, I do understand with this omnicidal culture that wants to have its finger in everywhere and wants to violate everything. I understand why sanctuaries are taboo. But this is one reason I think that what you're doing is really revolutionary and important, is that it that notion we need to understand. I can't believe that people don't understand that fish need places where they can reproduce.
Well, Derek, you've this bringing up this tragedy of the commons is a brilliant uh, observation of this situation. I hear, without people knowing that or saying that those terms, I hear my wealthy friends down here using that argument one way or the other all the time. Look, we can't trust the local Mexican people. They will just inundate and wipe out everything. The only way to protect is if we buy up all this land around here and if we, guard it against anyone using it. Well, that's what's happening. The almost entire coastline down here over the last 5 years, the fishermen have been kicked out because the wealthy people have bought the federal zones. In one case, the fishermen were not kicked out; they were allowed to keep their boats, but they couldn't keep their little houses there anymore. So this person was really great. They actually bought them houses in the inland, which wasn't what the fishermen liked, but still. So there is that belief in this tragedy of the commons that you just can't trust the common people because they will overdo it. Now, certainly we know that if wealthy people are owning 90% of the land, that there's going to be a tendency for people to go into the forest and into our rainforest here, our dry rainforest, and just to survive. They're going to do it. But once you can get both of those communities, the wealthy community who distrusts the local common man and the common people who have historically not trusted the wealthy invaders, if you will, when you can get them at the table like we're doing here, and then go toward the Shoshone or the indigenous worldview of that you just described, all of a sudden those deeper things come up. And I'm not being an idealist here. I mean, no one can believe that this is happening here. No one. People have wanted this to happen for years and years and years, especially the big tourist resorts that are popping up around here. And they can't believe that it's happening because it was grassroots. They just can't, because of the tragedy of the commons mentality. They just can't believe that this has gotten this far without big top money or big top government. This is all coming from, this little fishing village of 300 to 400 people. But once you can see signs that this person from Santa Barbara was telling you about, bless her heart, at the end of our conversation last night, that's what she said. She said, well, that makes sense. If we don't kill them, they'll grow. So I don't know. It's given me more work than I've had in a long time, but it's also given me more hope that maybe we can be a model because there's so few of them. There's one in Lundy, England, but I wouldn't really, we're where the really indigenous mestizos live, and even in the Cabo Pulmo one, even it's a wonderful model, and I'm glad National Geographic and everybody are boasting about it, and we're trying to replicate it. But even it is much more of a sophisticated, Southern California, south of California kind of a thing. We here really are doing this with the real common people, and it's not easy. Every day they start to have distrust. And we have to show transparency with where all the money is going. They hear that we've made this 20,000 and they go, well, who's going to get it? They trust me. So they made me the president of the association, which is the last thing I wanted because I wanted a local community member. But for the first year, I think, there's enough trust from both sides that I think that's probably important. And we'll have elections in a year, But yeah, it's we've got to understand the truth parts of the tragedy of the commons, and we've got to understand the falsity, and then we've got to understand what it takes to mitigate it.
So what are some of the apart from the cash that you mentioned a moment ago, what are some of the obstacles that you're facing? I mean, is there a chance that a giant transnational Korean fishing company could come in and wipe out all the fish, or is there a chance? What are some of the threats, if there are any, that
Well, you got
you're
it.
facing?
You got it. You got it. Cabo Pulmo, when I just, like I say, I just went there 2 months ago to figure out how to do this. And they are right now fighting a 20,000 room hotel that the Chinese are trying to bring in there. But now, because it's becoming so world famous as a place you can dive and see actual what the ocean used to look like, right? And so they know what will happen if that hotel gets in. One of the people that runs a restaurant there, she was a non-Mexican person, but she said, we've had 9 hotels come in over the last 12 years from when the idea was, they first had conceived the idea, and they fought all of them successfully. So no, that is an issue. What we're fortunate about here in that regard is this will never be a Cancun area, because the wealth of the people who have the eco resorts here is catering to such a wealthy category of people that, interestingly, they only want ecotourism. I have a private joke, and I hope whoever's listening to this, which will be many people, will not be mad at me for it. But I kind of think that in many cases, some of my friends are from some of the wealthy people from around the world coming to stay in the wealthy places are doing it. They want the ecotourism so they don't feel guilty, because their jobs are probably oil company drilling in the Amazon, or whatever, palm oil businesses, right? Because that's how they made their money. But anyway, so we're going to have a little less problem. There's not going to be any huge multi-room things like they're facing in Cabo Pulmo right now. However, I still think we do have the fishermen issue. We've got to convince the fishermen that this is good for the ocean, because they're very jealous about their favorite spaces to fish. And then we do have the starvation issue of the fishing cooperatives. The fishing cooperatives in one village, like here in Punta Perula, there's 8 cooperativos. They go all the way to way past Arroyo Seco. Well, bless their hearts, when they hear that the lobster are back and the fish are bigger, I can tell you that until I can get to everyone and have a conversation, they're going to sneak in there and get their fish, because this is their life blood. This is their daily bread. And until we can get them to be willing to even sacrifice this small zone and continue in the big ocean and go ahead and not go where it's easy, we're going to have to keep this development of a legacy of an indigenous getting into their, because all the Mexicans are mestizos like me. They're all half, they're not Irish and Indian, but they're Spanish and Indian, and they all have that DNA understanding like we all do. But how do you get to it? And I think the more and more of a radio program, you're the first radio program in the world now to have done this. Entrepreneur was the first magazine, and I hope that we, in our next month, we're going to go beyond our 27,000. We're going to see if we can go for a lot more, but mostly not for the money, because that's a pittance compared to what we'll need and what we'll maybe get from some environmental group. It's more the sort of the popular media. And we got people from all over the world who have donated $1, $5, $50, right? And no one has taken the award. You have to give an award on Kickstarter. And I gave 2 days at my beach, my beach cottage, and paddleboard lessons. I thought I can do that. And of the 50 people who have pledged, only one has taken me up on it, which I'm really glad. They've all said, no, we're not doing this for the award. And this is on a fun share thing that's all about entrepreneur and business stuff, right? So that's where my hope resides, is people will hear this and say, you know what? Let's make a model, because this will be truly a grassroots model.
So tell me how y'all chose why did you choose to have the sanctuary where it is, as opposed to a mile north. I mean,
Sure,
what is it about
sure.
that particular place?
Yeah, great. That's an incredible question because it's all about what makes us really special. And I didn't even mention it. And had you not asked the question, I might have forgot. We have a living 60-hectare mangrove that's dying, and it's up just behind. So you got the ocean, and then you got a beach, and then you have beach homes, and then you have, and the town is about a half a mile from that, and then you have the hills, and then you have the mangrove. Well, the mangrove, and maybe I did mention it a little bit, the mangrove had been cut off so that people could, the ejidos could, have more land to sell or cattle to graze on it, right? And so the mangrove wasn't making it to the ocean. And that's what brought me into this to begin with. So we're making the no-take zone so that the middle of the exit of the estuary coming out of the 60-acre lake, mangrove lake, goes right into our no-take zone. So the baby fish coming out of the nursery will go into immediately a protected place, because with the net fishing on the coast, they would be toast as soon as they got to the ocean, right? And so we chose the location on the beach that has two of these geographic benefits. One is it's where the exit of the mangrove is, and two, we've got the Los Frailes, which is Spanish for the brothers, two huge rock islands that make a really good habitat. And so we go 4 kilometers out from the mangrove exit to where it's 200 feet deep, because that's what all the research shows you have to do for a no-take zone. It's got to go from 0 feet to 200 feet. But we've got the mangrove that's now coming back to life. It's starting. We have like a 2-foot trench right now, and we had a big celebration when we saw it reach the sea. It was like, and the ocean, but it's like the mother ocean is like she's trying to get into the lake, and the lake's trying to get to her. It's like watching this scene of a mother and its child reuniting. So it's going to do it on its own. I just hope that we can get the bridge built in time, or else people will get mad again. And then we got another barrier, because if people bump into the estuary and there's no bridge to get to their beach homes, then they will, say the heck with the marine preserve. We want our road to our beach home. And of course, that's understandable.
So, tell me about some of the creatures who will be helped by this, the
Sure.
non-human creatures, like
Well,
specifically.
the first one that is, for me, is the lobster. I wrote a book called The Shrimp Habit: How It's Destroying Our World and What You Can Do About It. And it's been a real failure, because people don't want to read it because they love shrimp so much, right? But we have a place right where the estuary comes out and goes up towards the Frailes, about 2 kilometers, where shrimp fries grow. And the big shrimp boats that come from everywhere, they park right outside the island, which is now they're not going to be able to because of our zone. And that's where the fries grow up to be big shrimp. So shrimp will be saved here, at least until they migrate outside the zone. So that's one thing. The lobster that I started to talk about are non-existent. You can if you go out at night with a flashlight, an underwater light, you're lucky to see one come out. And if you do, it's going to be about 4 inches long. When you go to the beach where the pangas come in every day, and you look at what they've got, they'll bring out a cooler full of lobster. There'll be pregnant mother lobsters with the eggs all over them. They'll be 4 inches long, 5 inches long. And then, of course, the gringos who live in the little fishing villages, they buy them. And I try to tell them, don't buy them. Of course, they say, well, it's too late. They already got them, right? So we don't. So we'll bring in London, England, they were able to bring lobster back very quickly. There's the octopus, which I think is one of the most intelligent creatures in the sea. There's stories about how they're in in aquariums, and they watch the person unscrew a lid to take food every day. They've been known to go out of the aquarium, go to the jar, and unscrew the lid themselves. That's how intelligent they are, right? But anyway, it's a traditional source of food here, and they're disappearing. We've got Wachinango, which would be red snapper in English, and the red snapper will be at the periphery of our zone at around 200 feet, and you go to the marketplace and people are coming in with huge pongafuls of Wachinango, and instead of them all being, because they take a long time to grow, instead of them all being big, you're seeing 8 to 10 inch ones, and they're going on big ice trucks that go into Guadalajara. So it's not for the local consumption even. It's just, for the greed of the profit. And then we've got the beautiful Dorado here. And Derrick, just real brief story to talk about the synchronicity and the spirit that's driving this. There was a wealthy American who made his money in vitamins, who lives in Arroyo Seco, who's, I'm trying to get a board to support us because he's a really nice guy and everybody trusts him and they think it'd be great if he could be a board somehow. So he came over to go paddleboarding with me where I live, which is about 20 minutes away. And we're out paddleboarding and we're coming back sort of abreast with about 3 feet or 4 feet space between us. About 100 meters from the coast in fairly shallow water. And he said, well, you know what, Foros, I like this project. I'm going to support it. He said, the people in Arroyo Seco have always been good to me and they deserve it. And then I said to him, and don't forget our non-human friends, because I really believe if we keep calling natural resources and not calling them our relatives, it's never going to work.
Right.
And so I played that kind of, semantic card and said, well, thank the community for sure, but also thank the fish who will thank you for giving them a home. At that very moment, 3 5-foot-long Dorados swimming abreast with their brilliant blue and green and yellow colors came right between our two pongas in water that you never see them in. And of course, I thought, wow, this is the spirits responding. But I was real nonchalant and he went ape on it. And I said, see what I mean? They just came to thank you in advance. And now he calls the project the Three Dorado Project.
It's I'm going to say it's extraordinary, but maybe it's not extraordinary how often that sort of thing happens. I remember one time I was sitting next to a salmon-bearing stream talking to a bunch of young students. And at one point we were talking about salmon, and I said, the line I always say about hope, that hope is really a longing for a future condition over which you have no control. And so I said, I don't hope that salmon survive. I will do whatever it takes to make sure they survive. And the moment I said that, there was a big salmon swam right up to the edge of the stream and basically stuck its nose, just barely out of the stream directly at this group of students. It was like 3 feet from it. That sort of thing. I think that's how we're supposed to live. I think that's exactly
how we're supposed to live, and it happens constantly for me. It has ever since my days on the reservation, but it happens in this project almost every day. And I just tell my wife, I go, I don't know how that happened. And she says, well, you know how it happened. And in the animal world, it's so, the invisible world, the animal world, the plant world, it's so alive and it's so participatory. And, we had a group of students at a school here where I helped start. I had them go out. I said, this is what I want you to do. I want you all, and they were from about 7 years old to about 15. And came from both the Mexican village and from the wealthy folks who come here to winter. I said, I want you to go outside and touch some plant and then come back in. And that's all. So they all did, and they came back in kind of bored. And then I said, I know you're all going to laugh at me now, but I want you to listen to me carefully, and I want you to really trust me, and I want you to do this sincerely. I want you to go out again, and I want you to ask permission of a plant or tree. It can be the same one or a different one, before you touch it, and I want you to wait for an answer. And of course they all, they laughed, and especially the older ones, But their teachers took the younger ones out. The older ones said, okay, Foros, we'll do it. And they went out, And Derek, when they came back, you could have heard a pin drop. And when they started telling their stories about the responsiveness, as if they were talking to another fellow human being, even one telling the story about a recent hurricane and how it barely survived. I mean, we had one teacher crying. I had goosebumps. And then I said to everybody, this is how your ancestors, our indigenous peoples, this is how they fought and lived and breathed every day. We just did it as a little classroom experience. And so once we tune in, I think you're right. It happens a lot more than we know.
I live on 40 acres of second growth redwood up here in Northern California, and when I first moved in here, I could feel there wasn't anything tangible that I could point to, but I could feel that the land was, basically sort of perceiving me as a good Nazi. It's like, yeah, he's okay, but we'll see. And then I started kicking off the off-road vehicle people who would come here, and then everything changed with the land here. Everything changed when 3 days in a row I caught some guy cutting burls off of redwood trees and kicked them off the land. And in the next 3 days after that happened, one is I saw the biggest red-legged frog I've ever seen. The next day is I saw the biggest pile of bear poop I've ever seen. And the next day there was a bird flew out of the underbrush and brushed my chest with its wing. And that ever since then, since that time, I've had bears walk right next to me. The whole place has just opened up because it's like, okay, yeah, you are actually here to protect as opposed to just use.
And if I can add to that,
please.
In addition to all of the community of your relationships endorsing and acknowledging and sharing with you, if we only had the knowledge that we've lost of what each of the animal creatures that came to you, what their sort of metaphorical symbolic meaning is, or what their teaching is. We don't have that anymore. You can go on Google, of course, and you can look at a variety of different things and kind of intuitively, wow, that's what that means. But I suggest that when you have a frog come out, appreciate what we've been talking about, because that's probably equally important. But try to find out as much as you can about the lifestyle and the cycles and what all about that frog, and see what is it in your particular life that has that meaning. I'll give you a very brief story that I would not have ever said on the air before. But I'm at a place now where we're all in the same world, and my brothers who think that I'm sharing too much, which is, they'll have to hear this and allow it. But real briefly, I was preparing for a Sundance, and I heard that in South Dakota on the reservation it was going to be 114 degrees. And because we danced without water for 4 days, I was truly afraid that I would not be up to it. I went up and did my ombleche, my vision, put my tobacco ties on around the circle, and I sat down with the chanupa to cry for a vision that would help me get my fearlessness to go pray for the world in the Sundance on this very, very hot weather. Immediately, this little rat-like creature stepped into the circle and started eating some of the tobacco on one of the ties, and immediately I kicked him out of the circle. And then immediately I felt like a complete jerk, realizing, oh my gosh, that might have been, the wisdom that I came up here to see. And so I sat there thinking, now I'm going to be up here for 24 hours, and I blew it, right? And I'm sitting there. Well, it came back, and it ate some more tobacco. It turned around and sat down as if it was a mascot, facing the same direction to the west that I was, and it had a long tail and big haunches. Anyway, make this story short. The next morning, I came down to make my fire for the inipi, and I rushed into the house. And my wife goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "I got to get on Google, on the internet." And as silly as that sounds, and I went up and got on it, and I Googled mammals of North America, rodents, and there it was, the kangaroo rat, the only mammal in North America that can go a lifetime without a drop of water.
and I mean that's a beautiful story, and it reminds me. I mean, also it just cracks me up how, and also breaks my heart, how patient the world is with us. I mean, I can't tell you in my own life how many times that's happened where I've asked for some help in understanding something, and as soon as I get it, because it came in the form of a mosquito, I try to push it away, or it's like, no, that's not the form I want. And
Yeah.
and how the world is being killed, and and the world is so patient and kind with us, and I think I don't know. I mean, I don't know where to go with that. It's just the world is so rich and kind and loving with us, and I wish that more of us would open up to that.
Well, this is probably a very inappropriate thing for me to say, but I've had a long day today, and I am going to say this publicly for the first time. Um, I have lost hope for us being successful in preventing the calamities that are coming. And I'm not a doomsdayer, but I just feel that what you're saying, because of our lack of getting it. Now, then you say, well, why are you doing the work? I believe that we're going to rebuild, that the potential for rebuilding is there. And I believe that we need to let nature know, let our brothers and sisters know, let the ancestors and the spirits know that, okay, maybe we went past a point of no return, and maybe there's too many people who still don't get it, or who are too starving to death and are struggling just to survive, whatever. We got to rebuild. And I'm just hoping that when they figure out how to create a radio again, that someone will tune in to Derrick Jensen's radio program instead of Rush Limbaugh's. And so I'm sort of like, I still think it's an optimistic viewpoint, but it's a lot more pessimistic than I've ever really shared before.
Well, I don't, as you know, I don't have a lot of optimism. I'll tell you one thing that does give me some sense of hope, if I can use that word, or optimism, very tiny sense, which is there are more than 450 dead zones in the ocean, and only one of them has recovered. And the one that recovered, it was very simple. It's because the Soviet Union collapsed and they could no longer do destructive agriculture near the Black Sea. And that one has recovered over the last 20 years, just because that's the thing. If this culture stops stabbing the world and there's still enough of the world left, the world can come back. So we only have like a minute left. And what I'd like to ask you, obviously people can support you by going to the Kickstarter page, but I want to ask something else too about how can people replicate. People need to do what you're doing all over the world. So somebody who lives in Canada or in India or in the United States, how can they do what you've done? What's their first three steps?
Okay, the first thing to do is to canvass everyone in the community about their knowledge of the lost fisheries, how over the years they've seen fewer and fewer fish. The second thing to do is let's use state-of-the-art marine science and intuition and ancient indigenous knowledge and stop killing a section of them so that they can come back. And let's do that through a volunteer program like they did in Friday Harbor, where they did it completely voluntary, and it's working up there in Washington State. And that's what we need to do. They are few and far between, and it requires people to knock on doors and say, let's do this volunteer. Once it becomes volunteer, the federal people are so happy to come in and help with some rules and regulations for the outlying people who need to be told not to do it.
Well, thank you so much. And I would like to thank listeners for listening. My guest today has been Four Arrows. This is Derrick Jensen for Resistance Radio on the Progressive Radio Network.